Hey guys, welcome to the video lecture for chapter 22. Keep in mind this is going to be on exam 3. This material will not be on exam 2, so you don't have to worry about studying for the exam with this material for a while. So just be aware of that. But in this chapter, we're going to look at how firms are structured, namely their costs, and how they determine how much output or product to produce. So an interesting development over the last couple of decades or so is 3D printing, which is basically this form of additive manufacturing, and it has a lot of promise for really changing how manufacturers operate. So there's one special type of 3D printing called molecular printing, where it applies basically miniaturized additive manufacturing techniques to the production and combination of complex molecules, so on a really small scale. Now, why are we thinking about this? Well, this is going to have a strong impact on the costs of firms, particularly those that are in manufacturing. So that's what we're going to be looking at here. And this, of course, is an example of technology that reduces the costs of production. So as far as our learning objectives go, we're first going to want to be able to discuss the difference between the short run and the long run from the perspective of a firm. This is going to turn out to be really important, this distinction. Next, we're going to want to be able to describe production at a firm and explain why the marginal product of labor, something called the marginal product of labor, eventually gets smaller as more and more units of labor are employed in the production process. Next, we're going to want to be able to explain the short-run cost curves that a typical firm faces and see what's important there in the short run as far as costs go. And then we're going to wrap up the chapter with a discussion of long-run cost curves that the typical firm faces and talk about something called minimum efficient scale. Okay, so this is our chapter outline. Okay, we're going to look first at the short run versus the long run, then we're going to talk about the firm's production decision, then we're going to look at the short run cost curves to the firm, and we're going to wrap up with the long run cost curves for the firm. All right, so to get you thinking about this a little bit, did you know that the first fundamental design alterations for helicopters, since they were invented in 1939, enable them to provide more service, right? Fly more miles, longer distances per unit time with essentially the same amount of fuel and other inputs. So increases in technology, again, another example of technology lowering costs of production. Now, the Army, their primary motivation is to cut its overall operating expense, and energy costs are a key expense for them in operating these helicopters. So, think about this within the context of firms' costs, right? What are the main determinants of the expenses incurred by private companies? That's kind of one thing we're going to be looking at in this chapter. And so that's, to understand these questions and the answer to these questions, you have to learn about the nature of the costs that a typical firm will incur.